Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. Today, I am with Meenadchi, who is a facilitator and somatic practitioner whose work centers the softness of meeting our best self and deepening into our collective light. Using a blend of family constellation therapy and nonviolent communication, Meenadchi weaves workshops in which participants are invited to reconnect with the intuitive wisdom of our bodies and to co-create intergenerational healing by changing the way we speak to ourselves, each other, and the universe. Meenadchi holds a clinical license in occupational therapy and has historically served communities impacted by state and gender-based violence, complex trauma, and severe mental illness. Did I say that right? Severe mental illness. Let me read that sentence again.
I think it also should be serious mental illness. I think I might have sent you the wrong thing. So hi editor, have fun with this one. We're sorry.
Yeah. Oh, so you don't work with people that have severe mental illness.
I would say serious mental illness.
Okay. Perfect. I'm glad we did that. Okay. Meenadchi holds a clinical license in occupational therapy and has historically served communities impacted by state and gender-based violence. No, I'm just going to read this whole thing again to make it easier on them. Okay. Pause, cut, repeat. Here goes. Meenadchi is let me intro myself. Welcome back to Your Story Medicine. Today, I am with Meenadchi, who is a facilitator and somatic practitioner whose work centers the softness of meeting our best self and deepening into our collective light. Using a blend of family constellation therapy and nonviolent communication, Meenadchi weaves workshops in which participants are invited to reconnect with the intuitive wisdom of our bodies and co-create intergenerational healing by changing the way we speak to ourselves, each other, and the universe. Meenadchi holds a clinical license in occupational therapy and has historically served communities impacted by state and gender-based violence, complex trauma, and serious mental illness. They are also the author of Decolonizing Non-Violent Communication, and is how I initially learned about them. So a little backstory, I remember taking some nonviolent communication classes and just thinking, oh, God, this feels very surface. When nonviolent communication actually feels like a privilege because it's and here's another thing, I'm also working myself on not seeing things so much in binaries, privilege versus oppression. But in my own personal experience with this work, there was a very little awareness when it came to how systems of oppression can impact the ways that we actually are able to communicate with each other. So coming across your book was it was medicine for my soul, for somebody to actually be talking about these intersections, and is how we ended up becoming playmates together. That's what I'm calling it.
It's a good word. It's a good word. It's good for me.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, and this is back when I was still doing these freelance gigs and got contacted to facilitate a Q&A session for some play. And I'm like, who can hold this container with me? This person, Meenadchi, who wrote this book. And you said yes to the invitation, and we learned how to dance so beautifully together. And and an audience of 100+ people who were asking these difficult conversations of how to hold space for courageous conversations when it comes to trauma and their loved ones. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm thinking about that because that was such a sweet time. And I think, one of the things I think I have never told you is that you're a really big part of the reason that got me to begin investing in myself in really big ways. Like, I remember during that time, like I had been going through a lot of different things. I didn't have like a proper job. My housing was up in the air. And then this offer came through. Like you sent it to me, I think via Instagram. And it just was like so grounding and wonderful. And I think that was also around the time I started to get to know your work, which for me is really centered on consistently choosing joy, like no matter what life throws at us, being able to see it not from like a rose colored lens, but like I choose to see the blossom in this shit show. Like I
Yeah.
choose to see it. And I will continue investing myself each and every time. So thank you for gifting me with those
Oh,
things.
oh, I so receive that because oftentimes we tend to put people on this high pedestal, not realizing that's like we have our own stuff. We're going through our own journey. It
Mhm.
takes a lot to be able to put ourselves out there. And so for you to self-publish this book, Decolonizing Nonviolent Communication, it it made me see you already as an expert. And so to reach out, it's a every time I invite guests onto this podcast, it's because I have
Mhm.
deep admiration for every individual and their story. And so every conversation is just that gentle reminder that we've all the medicine it is we are sharing currently is a result of our own journeys and what it is we've been through. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do, side note, Meenadchi was in Roots to Rise. And so you're going to recognize this question as an alumni. What are you celebrating about yourself today?
Oh my God. I was thinking about this because I knew it was coming. I think the thing that I'm celebrating about myself today, which actually also it's a good reminder because it's also my New Year's intention, was that I'm so willing to say yes to life. Like yes and yes and yes and yes and yes. And I just like, I think when I think about like gratitude or how to cultivate a life that we want to continue investing in, it's almost like these micro moments. And so just saying yes to getting up, saying yes to like having a cup of water, saying yes to connecting with a beautiful individual, all of those things. Obviously it feels like a contribution. It's fun to be here and play, and it feels like a celebration of self as well.
By the way, if you listened to the very first episode of this season, I gave a shout out to Meenadchi because I was talking about a workshop I did called Dreaming as Strategy, Envisioning Ourselves as Future Ancestors. And I just remember a conversation we had where we were just talking about how like dreaming gets to be a strategy. We don't have enough spaces for that. It is in the dream world where we get to cultivate those feelings of joy and not only envisioning but embodying this future that we are co-creating as if it is already here. And I know that that has so much to do with your medicine. So if we can take out your titles, how is it that you would describe what it is you do in the world?
Ooh, okay. So I have so many good answers to this one, I think, or like pieces. I think the one is I help people find the words that really feel true for them. I think a lot of times when we're frozen or stuck wanting to say and do the right thing, there's a truth that kind of gets trapped in the body and our words start to fumble and we don't know really what it is that we want to say, whether it's to our loved ones or how to stick up for ourselves, or even how do we want to talk to ourselves in a way that is generative and kind. So, one is just helping people find the words that really feel true. And the other is really helping people to connect to the fact that our ancestors want the best for us and that our ancestors are everywhere. There's nothing we have to say or do to prove ourselves, to be more than who we are. Like, knowing actually that who we are in this moment is exactly who we were meant to be, and then giving ourselves the trust to be able to continue in our path with this light and with this love.
Speaking of ancestral lineage, how would you share what yours is, and also how has it influenced your path toward decolonizing nonviolent communication?
Mm. It's a good question. So my people are Sri Lankan Tamil. We'll also say Uran Tamil, Jaffna Tamil, Ilangay Tamil. I was just talking about words that feel true, and I'm like, I don't even know which words feel true. Like, we're from this island. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's play this game.
Okay.
So tell me where your ancestors are from without
Mm.
telling me where they're from. Tell me about the
Oh,
foods they ate,
uh-huh,
the
uh-huh.
songs they sang.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's just
yeah.
play with
Yeah.
that.
I love this question. My ancestors are from a place where fish are both food and beauty. My ancestors are from a place where rocks and walls combine to become drums. My ancestors are from a place where we know and have forgotten and are learning to remember the connection between the land and the ocean. And we're from a place where the air is so dry and yet the land is so rich. Yeah, I don't even have words to describe that, but there's like a quality of emergence, the way the palm trees sway, that just fills you with air and life.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. I'm gonna ask that question all the time now. It's just
Mhm.
so much more visceral because I feel myself there versus just like this country that is
Mm.
defined by these borders that were drawn. And um no, like my ancestors are so much more than that. They are the palm trees, they are the sea, they are the legacy of people who cared for the earth. And here we are in this lifetime just remembering. So tell us more about that journey of your own reconnection to your ancestral lineage. And I also feel like we tend to glorify where our ancestors are from.
Mm.
And I mean, there's a huge trauma that comes with being children of immigrants, with immigrating here to this country, with language barriers, cultural barriers between first, second generation. My own parents, I'm navigating this as we speak. What happens when there's no words in the English language to share what's on our hearts? What if it's not in the culture of our parents to be able to actually have these courageous conversations with their children? Because as I have been doing my best to embody healthy means of communication with my own mother, who, um, if you've heard on my previous episodes, like I'm caring for my elders who are getting ready to any day become ancestors. One of the things that I constantly hear back from my mom is, oh, well, my generation, or of course, like I wasn't raised with this, or, oh, another one. This is one that she kept saying to me in the last courageous conversation I had. You're too sensitive. I'm like, I'm just sharing what's on my heart. Oh my gosh. So yeah, tell us about what your journey has been like with decolonizing nonviolent
Yeah.
communication, not just for the community, which you are so skilled at, but with your own family.
Yeah, my story is so okay. So, all right. So, there's two pieces to this. So, first, I'll tell you the story of how I got into nonviolent communication. So, my people are from Jaffna, from Sri Lanka, and I was born in 1983, 3 days before the war began. That was a war for our liberation, which ended in 2009. So I grew up with the war as a backdrop, and my family had already left Sri Lanka, so we were out of the country by that time. But you grow up knowing about it, thinking about it, wanting our people to have a homeland. And I was home from college in 2002, and at that time there was a ceasefire. between the liberation movement and the government. And my amma told me my amma is my mother. And she was like, there's this woman who's doing a fundraiser because she wants to move back home and teach nonviolent communication. And we were both like, we don't know what that thing is, but we got to find out who that woman is. So we went, and her name is Jayanti Siva, and I call her Jayanti Akka, which means big sister. And both mine and my Amma's worlds completely like radically changed and transformed, because we're like, there's a way to talk about like shit in the house when we're mad at each other, and we don't have to like yell or like we don't have to do it. It was like, whoa, it was just like wild. And my Amma, my Amma's a bomb ass ancestor in the making, because one of the things that I think she gifted me with, and that I have seen in my lineage, is that she has a really strong desire to grow. So when she was introduced to this tool, she also picked up on it and was really keen to learn about NVC. And then over the years, both Amma and I got the opportunity to travel back to Sri Lanka many, many times and to participate with Jayanti Akka in the trainings that she was doing there, to work directly with our people, with our youth, with survivors of the war. And we saw how important these tools for communication actually were, and empathy building, really, really deep listening. And we also saw the importance of having a trauma-informed and a culturally responsive lens. When trainers were coming into the country who didn't understand the context or didn't understand how to navigate the community, some of the things they were doing were just really weird. It was like, that doesn't work. You got to do things differently. And it's really Jayanti Akka who gifted me with the concept of decolonizing nonviolent communication. And, the way that I've crafted it and integrated it with other things really means just speaking our truth is the deepest form of nonviolence. And it takes a lot of energy, courage, community support to get there, because kind of, as I was saying, oftentimes we don't know what our truth is. We're unpacking all of this stuff. We're unpacking what are the beliefs that I actually hold versus what are the beliefs that my parents want me to hold. And then if I have different beliefs, does that mean I'm betraying my parents? Does that mean I'm betraying my family if I hold a different truth? Then how do I stand in my truth and know that this is the one that's meant for me? So it gets deep. But yeah, so that's a quick piece of that. And I think the other thing that I'll say is, I come from a people, in 1983 and well before that, in the 70s and 50s and going backwards, the Sri Lankan government was and is deeply genocidal. And so there is all the harms that you can imagine, that come from impacted communities that my family members have faced and navigated. And there are also things that I know that my own people have done in our pursuit of liberation. There are ways that my family members and community, people who I love and, people who I will never forget, have also participated in the marginalization and oppression of other communities. And that kind of dynamic of something has been taken from us and now we will take from you, I have also seen that play out. And so there's a component of really deep appreciation and a willingness to navigate complexity, that we are not just one thing. I don't remember if you mentioned this earlier, if it was in our just like regular chat, but like shifting away from the binary of like, what is this? Like, we're in it together, yo. So like, what does that actually mean when we say we're in it together, and how do we build those bridges?
Yeah, because it's one thing to say like practicing nonviolent communication is a privilege versus it's what it is. It's a practice. We get to learn this together, and oftentimes when we put things in these binaries, it's either this or it's that. No, it can be both. So for those who are new to NVC, and that's what we're going to call it from here on out, because it's a lot for me to see. Nonviolent communication. We love acronyms over here. So for
Mhm.
those who are new to NVC, how would you describe it, and how is decolonizing NVC different?
Yeah. So, nonviolent communication, and again, you're going to get different answers from different
Mhm.
practitioners. But nonviolent communication is this kind of like modality that was developed by Marshall Rosenberg, who's a clinical psychologist. I think he grew up in Michigan. And it has like a very structured way of speaking to each other, offering an observation, connecting that to a feeling and a need, and then making a request. And understanding that our feelings are a result of whether our needs have been met or not. And so, if we can kind of take a little bit of ownership of our own feelings and our own needs, then we can make requests of each other that sort of, anytime we take ownership of something, it's me, it's not necessarily about you. We can create language, or put our sentences together in a way that that has less likelihood of triggering a defensive response, right? And if we don't trigger that defensive response, then we can get our needs met more easily, which is beautiful in a lot of different ways. And for DNVC, so decolonizing nonviolent communication, it integrates, number one, really listening to the body. So, what are the body's messages? How is our body communicating to us? It takes out all the formula. There's no right or wrong way to say anything to each other. What is true is that we need an emotional vocabulary. We have to actually know how to talk about our feelings. We have to know how to articulate our needs. But then the way that we communicate, like code switch however you want, just speak the thing and make the request, right? And also that we don't actually have to always ask for things. Sometimes we can demand things. Sometimes we can set boundaries, right? There's a lot of options. The key is, do we have access to a sense of choice? Do we have access to really understanding the information that our body is giving us and what my body is communicating? And see, do I really have a felt sense of like how you are doing and where you're at, and really almost like a felt sense that we are in this together? Because if I don't feel like we are in this together, then it's kind of like it doesn't matter. I'm just going to get mine, right? But if I trust and understand and really know in my body that you are here for me, I am here for you, that's what changes the way we talk to each other.
I think that we get so caught up in semantics. Am I saying the right word? And I mean, I say this all the time, words cast spells. But if the words are not coming from like the heart, or from like our gut or womb space, then that's it's just words. And so to hear you also share with me that your mother was deeply invested in decolonizing her own communication is just a beautiful example of what intergenerational healing can feel like, can look like. And so is it possible to practice NVC with others who are not invested in this work?
Mm.
Like, and just
Mhm.
speaking from personal experience,
Yes. Yeah.
me, like I will go and get therapy. I'll go hire
Mhm.
coaches to develop myself, but I cannot force my parents to. It has to be consensual. And so sometimes, like, the most radical thing I can do is walk away from a conversation. And other times it is me escaping from having these difficult conversations and allowing myself to stay grounded, to notice the trigger coming up in my body, to assess, am I reacted from the wounded child that's saying, see me? Or, and this has been my own rites of passage, how is it that I mother my own mother
Mhm.
without coming off as condescending? I'm educated, I speak English fluently, therefore I know what I'm talking about. I don't say that directly, but for those of us who did have the opportunity to access this, I mean, this is where so much division can happen as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, how do we practice this with people, especially our own loved ones who are not
Mm.
invested in this work?
Mhm. So I'll say two things. One, something that I always say is that having these skills doesn't make conflict go away. It just makes it different. I promise you it doesn't like,
Harm.
me and my Amma will still get into it. And sometimes we have different tools and sometimes we throw these tools at each other like weapons. It's not like, it's not going to go away. Right. So that's one. And then two, I think when people are asking this question, and I'm really gonna really call in and invite like the DNVC praxis, which is authenticity. Then the question actually becomes, is it possible for me to speak authentically to someone who is committed to inauthenticity, right? Or to someone who is committed to remaining trapped in their own cage, to someone who is committed to remaining trapped in like the histories of violence that they have been given, to someone who is committed to not changing, to someone who's committed to seeing the world as if the world isn't, just someone who's really trapped and is unwilling to break free. How do I speak to them authentically? And
Yeah,
I think
that's just the way that I am, though.
mhm, yeah. And what I'll offer two things. One, it takes practice. It really, really does. And one of the things, in the groups that I run, what often happens is because what we're really looking for, the thing that we need in order to be able to speak authentically to people who are like committed to being a certain type of way, is we need more capacity. We need more spaciousness, right? And we kind of keep looking to that relationship to be like, be the place where I can have some ease, where we can just get, understand each other, get to know each other, get the point across, right? But if we have a space, a container, or another relationship where we can go to replenish, we're actually then able to go back into those more kind of like fraught home environments, the intimate relationships, the partners, the parents, the families, because our cup is fuller, we have more spaciousness, and then we're able to engage with them in ways that are more authentic, that don't give up our dignity, but also that kind of can hold our ground in a little bit. And the more we're able to do that, it's kind of like a trickle down seep in effect, of people being able to see, oh, there's something here that works. And the folks who will be magnetized and drawn to changing their behavior, changing their dynamics, will do that.
Yeah, even though I'm not quite skilled yet in my own communication, just like again, it's a practice. I have noticed the the more I actually initiate wanting to have a loving conversation with my own mother, uh, the the more that I have seen her also open up and just assess like, wow,
Mm,
I didn't realize that the words that I sometimes carry have created so much harm. And so one of the things that I invited her to say is, instead of telling me that I'm so sensitive, what if you just said thank you? Thank you for sharing what's on your heart. Just that
mm,
simple.
mhm,
And it became an invitation, more of like, I need you to say this, and just like
mhm,
even asking my mom, like, how does that feel in your body to respond in a different way?
mm,
And it's like, our parents, many of our parents, our elders, and just people in society, they're not given these tools. We're not
mhm,
taught this growing up. And so I also do see this insatiable desire for growth, especially before she transitions. I'm like, you don't want me to
mhm,
be that child that resents their parents and then goes off compensating for my lack of not enoughness by overachieving or by looking for that in other relationships. We get to say in this lifetime that it stops here.
mhm,
So uh, one of the things I remember in NVC is how we tend to communicate our needs in a way that is still placing the blame on others
mm,
unconsciously. And so let's just explore one common example of how we try to absolve um, absolve like of how we try to repair relationships but end up creating more harm. um, One example that I can think of immediately is by telling somebody, like, when or okay what I know we're stepping away from like the proper
Let's hear it. Let's hear
NVC,
it.
but
Let's, the proper
okay, just
embassy
from
doesn't
okay,
exist here. Let's hear it.
okay. Like when you say blank, it makes me feel blank, or like you made me feel guilty, I
Mm,
guess would be one example. Or like, what would you say is a common one that people tend to
mm.
slip on?
I mean, okay, so many things are coming up. I'm like, first of all,
Mhm.
nobody makes you feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
if somebody tries to do that, you put it back on them, you put it on the side, you say, have a cookie because I'm not here for that guilt. I will show up to
Yeah.
like, um,
You made me feel bad. You hurt
mhm,
me. Or
mhm,
we're so limited in our language.
it's true. Okay, so I think on a real,
Mhm.
if you want to speak that way and that feels good for you, I'm always going to say do it if that's what feels true. Right. But for me, the core praxis or the core, one of the core components, right, that I meant is having access to a sense of choice. And so I will always rephrase my language in a way that gives me access to choice, because then it can invite the other person to collaborate with me on how do we get the needs met so that I don't have to feel that way. Because it is true that we're interdependent. So the things you do will fuck me up and they will make me feel a certain way. Right. But if I say, yo, when you do this, I have this type of feeling in my body and I'm really not here for that. I know that I can do some healing so that you can do whatever you want and I could still feel good, but is an invitation. Like, are you down to change your behavior? Are you down to change the particular words that you say when you're mad at me or when you want me to do something? Because that'll let me respond to you in a way where I don't feel shut down or I don't feel ashamed or I don't feel guilty. So finding, just constantly weaving both the balance of we're in this together and here's where I'm at. Does that make sense?
So what would be an alternative response then? Or another one's like, you made me angry. Like, can anybody actually make you feel those things? Or and that's what happens oftentimes in the rupture of relationships, is that we place the blame on how we felt or how we're feeling on the other person, as if it's
Mhm.
their responsibility to to fix that. And
Mm.
so what would be a more invitational way to come to some sort of consensus or repair?
Mm. I, what's coming up for me? What is coming up for me? I think there is like a lot of rhetoric in the emotional intelligence world that nobody can make
Mhm.
you feel anything, right?
Yeah.
And there's a certain way in which I do believe that, but it's so much more nuanced than that,
Yeah.
it's just so much more
Hmm.
nuanced. So I think what's coming up for me, even in this example, is there like a specific scenario that you can think of that I can offer
Mm.
a little bit of like live coaching around, because it's just
Ooh,
never so simple as like here's the phrase to say in the
I
right way.
know, right?
Yeah, it's like what's the
Exactly.
context? Yeah.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I feel like this is something that I commonly hear, and this happens in like a lot of social justice spaces as well, right? Where the blame is still external, to where it's like, yes, we want to acknowledge that there are systems at play that are really impacting our mental health and our well-being. And also there's the dance of, when do I take ownership of how it is I'm how I'm reacting, how I'm responding, which is why, like, you also talk about how, like, we cannot just rely on self-regulation. How is it that we
Mhm.
build a culture of co-regulation? So let's just, I mean, okay, I'm going to keep coming back to my mom as an
Okay.
example right now, because
Yeah.
this is just like full on embodiment of everything I've learned and I'm integrating in the household. Y'all want to see how much you've actually healed and how much you're growing.
It's true.
Stay with your parents and
Mhm.
then see what unfolds. um okay, so let me think of a more recent example. um, Mom, when you compare me to your friends' children that uh, are doctors, are lawyers, are engineers, or are married to people that have those titles, it makes me feel like like I'm not good enough.
Mm.
And what I need from you is um, for you to just be proud and acknowledge all of the work that I've put in to heal myself, to heal this family. This is a very recent
Mhm.
conversation, by the way,
Mhm. Mhm.
to which her response was, "Why are you being so sensitive?"
Uh-huh. Okay. Can I ask some
Yeah,
questions? And yeah,
yeah, go
okay.
ahead. Let's go.
Okay. The first question is, like, does your mom, does she, that's like real deep talk that like you and I can get on board with right away. Does
Yeah.
she vibe with that kind of language? Does she talk that way? How is she?
Of
Yeah.
course not.
Okay. So
Of
let's,
course not.
okay. Okay. So let's, okay. Okay. So that's step one. Step two is the thing, like, what is the thing you actually want to hear? I heard you say, do you just want to hear her say, I'm proud of you?
Yeah, I mean, she has been saying it since then, but and that was the other thing. Oh, such beautiful healing moments between us
Uh-huh.
because I also said to her, whenever I hear your conversations with your friends, 80% of
Mhm.
it tends to be revolved around complaining, actually like 100% of it. So what
Mm.
would it be like for you to actually talk about how proud you are every once in a while
Mm.
of your life, of your children? And that's when she shared with me, because when I do that, other people feel bad.
Oh, so deep, June. So deep.
Mhm.
So deep.
And so
And
then
this
she
is
shies away. She shies away from
uh-huh.
being able to
Yeah.
talk about the things that she unlike us, she
Mm-hmm.
does not have that culture in which her and her people celebrate
Mm-hmm.
themselves and each other. And so
Mm-hmm.
they bond through complaining and gossiping.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know
Mm-hmm.
any other way of communicating.
Mm-hmm. And I think also, it's like a piece around like for our families who come from collective cultures,
Yeah.
there's a sense of wherever my people are, that's where I'm going to stay because I'm committed to being with my people. So if my people are operating at a low vibration and everybody's complaining and everybody's like this, and this is bad, look at all the shitty things my kids are doing, right? We're going to stay at that vibration because changing takes us away from the collective. And so, or even though individual family members might be like, I actually do want to celebrate you, or I do want to feel proud, it's like a break in loyalty if we start behaving
Oh,
differently with each other. And I think
whew,
coming back to
a
this
lot. I
specific,
shouldn't even
oh,
say
coming up.
a lot of stuff is coming up just around this,
Okay.
because I feel like if you're listening and you're like, ooh, yeah, like we
Mhm,
can intellectualize all we want about
mhm,
NVC, but in practice,
mhm.
yeah, let's go. Okay, what were you gonna say?
So what I would say to you for your mom, and this actually just came up in a group, so it's really ironic and all those beautiful of coincidental timing. What I would say is get yourself into like a place where you feel a little bit replenished and be like, Mama, I just want to play. Like for these next 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you things that I want to hear you say, and then will you say them to me? And if she's willing, right, if the relationship is solid enough that and then just feed her things, because these may be literal words, June, she's never said, she's never heard. How does she know how to say, I'm proud of you? How does she know how to say, you haven't followed the path that was laid out for you? You haven't followed the path that everybody else's kids followed, but I'm so glad to see you here. I'm so grateful for who you're becoming. She's never heard those words in her life. How the heck is she going to know how to say them, right? And communication is muscle memory. So just sit with her and feed them to her. Be like, Mama, I just want to hear you say, I'm proud of you, June. And then she'll
Yeah,
try.
yes, or I'm proud of
Yeah.
myself. Like,
Yes.
practice bragging about yourself, Mom. You came from a small village
Yeah.
You were raised in a tiny home built on stilts with at least 10 other people, and look at the life that you've built today. Because this is another thing, is as we're going through this end of life planning process, which again, it could
Mm.
happen tomorrow, it could happen 10 years from today.
Okay.
um, but she constantly talks about how she's dying, and
Mhm.
I'm like, you're still here, we didn't know you were going to be here a year ago. What would it be like for you to just like celebrate that you're alive today? Let's just practice that. And so I love how you're mentioning this, because this has been a practice where now when I see her in the morning, I ask her, hey mom, what are you celebrating about yourself today? And then
Mhm.
it was so beautiful because she said, I am celebrating that even though I don't have a beach house. I'm like, okay, mom, okay, don't say anything, just let her keep going. Even
Uh-huh.
though I don't have a beach house, I get to look outside and see the sky and feel the sun on my cheeks, and life is just so beautiful.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I've never heard her say that. And so you're absolutely right. Our many of our parents don't have this language. And so we get to be that invitation. And I can feel the expansiveness in her own body as I offered that, and just a softening. And so
Mm.
um, this is really, to me, why it is I do this work at the end of the day.
Mhm.
That intergenerational healing piece
Mhm.
of being able to say it stops here, and healing doesn't have to be so strenuous, it can be
Mm.
playful.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think like this is where, for me, this is a piece of where the family constellation work starts to weave in, because a lot of times we really do. It doesn't matter how old you are. We almost always want to hear our parents say that they love us and that they're proud of us. And we have a hard time understanding. Like I remember when we relaunched my book, the second, or like the second edition, I think we had sold something like 1,000 copies in a week. And I called my Amma and I told her that, and she said, okay. I was just like, do you not know? Like, what is wrong with you? Right.
Yeah.
But it's this piece around, because one of the things that family constellation work will do is it gives us context. It helps us know and understand what it is. What are the bags that our parents are carrying that actually, because if you can imagine your parents carrying a bunch of like ancestral baggage that has been handed to them, obviously their hands are not free to hug us. Like their hands are not free to just like wrap themselves around us because they're carrying all these bags. And we can know that in theory, but when we start to map things out and actually understand some of the deeper, more complex pieces of context that we're coming from, it can then create a lightness in our own bodies to be like, oh, it's not about me. And oh, I can see the way that she loves me. And I can see the way she tries. And I can see that her limitations actually have nothing to do with my radiance.
Hmm. So for people who are new to family constellation, how would you describe it?
Family constellation work is it's like a somatic therapeutic modality, where we start to look at your current life block, or like something that's like feels stuck or sticky or just having a hard time going forward. How might that actually be related to a piece of intergenerational trauma that you didn't even realize you were carrying? I think a lot of us, I think most of us these days know that we're carrying intergenerational trauma, but we don't always connect the dots of how and why something is showing up in this particular way. I was working with somebody last week who hadn't connected the dots that her life is starting to blossom in the way that she wants, and she's feeling so guilty about it, and she couldn't figure out why. And it is because historically the women in her lineage have never had access to the life that they wanted. And so she was feeling tremendous guilt about finally having access to so many things that she's been dreaming of. Um, and so, again, we can know in theory, but to find the place in the body where we're holding that guilt, and then to do the release of like, actually, I get to go forward and it is with the blessing of my people.
Yeah, and to have others witness that
Yeah.
in this container that you facilitate. I've gone to one of your family constellation gatherings, and oh my God, to just be a witness made me feel like I was also a participant. I was receiving that healing for myself. And it was probably one of those moments where I realized too that, oh, joy and pleasure actually feel like a threat in my body when all I've known is fear, when I've been all that I've normalized is the guilt, is the shame, because I never had examples of of how it can be safe to feel any different from that.
I feel so happy to just hear that you like received that. And I think that like, because most of what I do is in group. I very rarely do individual sessions. And part of that is because I enjoy being in group containers. And I think that people, we're so hungry for community. But at the same time, we've really been, I think, conditioned by sort of conventional colonial standards of healing, right? Healing looks like being in one room with a therapist, all eyes on you. And we forget that when we are witness to the experience of somebody else's deep healing work, we receive gifts in tandem because our journeys are not actually so separate. The specific details, the names, etc., may be a little different, but the energetic vibes of what needs to be healed are so common that when we participate in healing work together, the whole thing amplifies.
Yeah, and you mentioned something earlier about just well, I you did it, the way that we would phrase it in the personal development world is like you can't um like people will fight for their own limitations. People will fight to defend their own stories. And I think it's important for folks to know before you step into this work of family constellation or even nonviolent communication is that it's going to require that you too are committed to releasing these stories and giving yourself permission to embody something new. And so, how is it that you would personally discern who is and isn't quite ready for this work? Not to say that Meenadchi is the gatekeeper, but we also have to be responsible in the spaces that we hold as facilitators and as healers. So, what would you say to somebody who is interested but isn't quite sure whether or
Mm.
not this would be the next step for them in their own
Mhm.
healing?
Yeah. Usually, what I ask people to do is just tap into their bodies. And when you hear some of these things that we might be talking about, and when we hear, for example, that actually there is permission for you to be your best self, or there is permission to heal. And when you hear things about like, there is permission for you to release your limiting beliefs and the limitations that you've placed upon yourself. And then check in when you hear some of those things. Does your body go super, super closed up? And it's like, no, there's not permission, right? Or is it this kind of place where it feels like a scary edge? There might be permission, but I've never done something like that before. Or is it this open, expansive of like, oh my God, give me that permission because I'm here for it. Right? And it's like, if you're in one of the latter two, if your body is opening up, or if you're at that place where, oh my gosh, that feels like a step. I've never tried that step before, but maybe, then I would say, yes, this is for you. If your body is in shutdown, if your body is like, no, I cannot go there, that doesn't feel good, everything is constricted, then it might be, then that's a good sign to look for other ways in or to other types of work before coming to family constellation therapy.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I feel like this is a beautiful way that we can also begin to discern the difference between when is it our trauma that's speaking and when is it our intuition.
Because it's really hard. I mean, first, just like, just this acknowledgement that the that is really, really hard, and when we are in group containers, one of the things that happens is that we speak whatever it might be. We're like, we kind of like articulate, here's the thing I'm trying to figure out. And then inevitably other people are like, boom, 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 boom. I resonate with that. I feel this, I feel that, and there's like a magic kind of like unraveling that starts to happen. Because the thing about trauma is that trauma exists in isolation. Trauma is like an experience that makes us feel alone. It's something that we, hold on to because we didn't have resources to heal at the time when it was most necessary, right? And when we begin to like take the stigma off of trauma, or like pull the veil back on what is there, as soon as we begin to see that we're not alone, then we can get to decide, oh, is this a reaction that actually serves my life? And a lot of times there's other people in the space who've had a similar kind of reaction, and collectively we can kind of come to a place like, oh, that reaction actually doesn't help get me closer to the relationships that I want to be holding. Then we know that's a trauma response. Versus if it's a response that you share with others and there's a sense of like ease in the system, and collectively everybody is just being like, oh, that feels really good, then that that's your intuition. But I think this kind of discernment can be done on your own, or it can be done in like a one-on-one session with somebody. I have just found in group containers it's so much easier to do the discernment, because there's a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, and speaking of family constellation, one of the things that I do remember is that it was actually first, I hate this word, discovered
Uh-huh.
in in a community of indigenous people. I believe it. What nation was it?
So the work is descended from the Zulu people. It is
Yes.
absolutely, Burt Hellinger. So my teacher, Sarah Payton, I think Sarah's teacher is Elena Vasilago, and Elena, I think, studied directly with Burt. Sarah might have also. Um, so Burt Hellinger was a Jesuit missionary who lived in South Africa for 16 years. And then when he came back to Germany, he kind of, took all the tools that he had learned and blended them with like other things that were happening in the psychotherapy world at that time, and then developed family constellation therapy. And it's actually one of the reasons that I became a family constellation practitioner, because the majority of people who know how to facilitate family constellation therapy are white. And the majority of them also kind of adhere to Burt Hellinger's model. And his model is, I mean, he tried, but it's heteronormative, it's racist, it's some shit that I'm like, no,
Yeah.
And I've talked to like kind of like my own teachers in medicine and magic who come from Black and Indigenous Brown communities, and just kind of navigated what's true, what's real, and also what's ethical and authentic. And have just been reminded that medicine also has its own agency, and that medicine is more powerful than we give it credit for. And so just to stay in alignment with the work, and to use it in the communities that I'm here to serve.
Yeah, and also our connection to the ancestral realm, to the unseen realm, to the cosmos, to the universe, to a higher source, to our intuition, and how the work that we're doing goes beyond just this one lifetime. So how is it then that deepening our connection to these greater forces, to our intuition and the universe, it can help to heal intergenerational trauma?
Mm. Well, the thing that I always say about intergenerational trauma, is when you heal yourself, first and foremost, you're healing yourself for yourself, right? Like when I heal me, I'm not actually healing for my lineage. My ancestors can do their own work. They have their own paths. My
Yeah.
parents have their own work. They can do their own thing. But when we heal really for ourselves in that selfish way, that's really beautiful, right? Like I'm here for me. I am going to be alive. I am going to do the damn thing. It sets off a vibration that can light up the whole system, where our ancestors, our spirits, our people anywhere around will be like, oh, what is that? What is Meenadchi eating over there? It smells so good. Get me some onions. Can we like figure out what that one is cooking? Like that's what happens when we heal for ourselves, not to stop the stuff, but just for us. It creates that ripple effect.
Yes. Yeah. Because one of my taglines is healing generations before and after us, but it's not to place the burden on ourselves to heal that.
Yeah.
It's and with my own journey of especially like as I've been dabbling into plant medicine, one of the things that was the greatest download for me was when my ancestors came through and they said, why are you telling yourself this story that you need to heal for us? We're gone, boo. Like, we're you that's yours. That's not ours. If you
Uh-huh.
want to, if you want to make us happy, like go and live your life in joy, do the things in this
Uh-huh.
lifetime that we weren't able to do.
Right. Yeah.
Ugh. Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
guess I guess I'll choose pleasure then.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
so so Meenadchi, what are the things that you are currently doing to stay grounded in these times, and also what is it that you've learned to release?
I think the things I'm doing to stay grounded, really, it's my morning routine. Like, I've been really enjoying a homemade lavender chai. So that really helps me stay grounded. I think all the small moments of gratitude, being able to appreciate each and every color that I see. And then moisturizing, having really good lotion helps me. Right now, I'm
That's
working with like
real.
pineapple cocoa butter, and another rose cocoa butter that I'm thinking about like playing with the recipe on. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And if you could share a ritual,
Uh-huh.
practice, or words of wisdom
Mm.
that you'd like for people to embody after this
Mm.
conversation, what would that be?
Mm. Whew. I think that might really tie into this other question you asked about what am I learning to release, and just letting go of the expectations that aren't yours to carry. And just taking that breath and imagining the expectations falling off and shedding. And also imagining and knowing that everybody's really glad that you're letting go of those expectations. On the earth life, our parents may not be glad, but their highest self, their best self, is actually happiest when we live our best life. So just breathing and releasing the expectations.
Mm, yeah, I release that with you.
Mhm.
And this is my favorite question of all.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you'd like to tap into this part of yourself, you're welcome to close your eyes and just like really feel yourself as an elder getting ready to transition into the ancestral realm. And maybe you are already that future ancestor who's looking back on your life and everything it is that you've gone through, everything it is that you are currently moving through. What is it that this version of Meenadchi would say to you in this moment?
Mm. There's a lot of different information coming through. Um, One, there's like a sensation of like, you'll get here. Like, don't worry, you'll get here. There's another piece that says, I see you. And then I can actually see like a version of my Amma behind that elder version of me, that says, you have twinkling eyes and a cheery face, which was something my Amma used to tell me when I was younger. All you need to be beautiful is to have twinkling eyes and a cheery face. So it felt really nice to tap into that and feel all of that coming through. Yeah. Thank you, June.
Thank you so much for sharing. Look, you are
Mhm.
already that badass ancestor. in my eyes. And so thank
Mhm.
you for embodying that in the here and now, for being in practice, for being the one to just like see conflict as an opportunity to strengthen our relations with one another. And I'm just so, so, so grateful that you put this book out there. I see it
Mm.
as the call to action for us to find each other. And I just see us just guiding each other back home. And so, for people who are interested in diving deeper into your medicine, where is it that they can go?
So you go to my website, which is meenadchi.com. And also on Instagram at Marshmallow Ammen. Ammen is the name for the Divine Mother, and I love Ammen and I love marshmallow. So you can come catch me
Yes.
on there.
Yes. And
Mhm.
I'll go ahead and leave the link in the show notes. Thank you, Meenadchi, for walking this earthly plane with me and to many lifetimes over.
Thank you, June.